Hey guys, and welcome back to Cleaning Up History, where my goal is preserving headstones and cemeteries and telling forgotten stories of the past. Tonight I'm doing the Halloween edition for the year. I've not done any of these videos in quite some time, so I thought it was time for me to do another video like this. I've been focusing more on my headstone cleaning and doing little TikTok shorts. But the temperatures are starting to drop again. And pretty soon I'm not going to be able to do any cleaning anymore, so I'm going to try to get back into doing some of these historic videos. Like I told you before, I'm sorry about the lighting. I'm in my car and it's dark, so I apologize for that, but I wanted to go ahead and get this filmed because I don't have a lot of time these days. But today's story is going to be about America's first documented serial killers. And I wanted to focus more on the victims and the families affected by these men, more so than I did on the actual serial killers. You'll find a lot of documentaries that have pictures of these Harpe brothers. There was no actual pictures of these men. It was in the 1700s. But there was a couple of artists who drew pictures based on descriptions. But I was at the Rice's grist mill in North Stam State Park today. And that mill was built by Mr. Rice in the 1700s. It was around, I want to say it was like 1790 or something. I've got pictures with information. I'll put those up. But Mr. Rice's brother, his name was John Rice. The grist mill was built in Lost Creek, which is now in the Chucks One Wildlife Management Area in Union County. He was the brother of John Rice, who was a preacher in Knoxville, Tennessee. Mr. Rice, Preacher Rice, had a daughter. It was his oldest child, his firstborn child. Her name was Sarah, was her given name, but she went by the name Sally. And in 1797, Sally married a man who lived about 4 miles away from them, and his name was Wiley Harpe. Now, I'll give you a little brief of this family. The Rices, they descended from, they were patriots in the American Revolution, and the Harpes were not. The Harpes, there are different sources who state different things. For the most part, they're referred to as the Harpe brothers, and that's probably what you'll hear me saying just because they're referred to that so much, and they refer to themselves as brothers. But genealogists think that more than likely they were first cousins and not brothers. There were two men by the name of Harper who migrated to the United States from Scotland. They were brothers, and it's believed that Big Harpe, or the first Harpe brother, the oldest of the two, hang on a second, there's a spider in my car. Okay, anyway. Big Harpe was the son of one of these brothers, and Little Harpe was the son of the other, making them first cousins. Micaiah Harpe, who was known as Big Harpe, he is described as a very large, stout man, approximately 6'4", with red undertones in his skin. He had very wild, thick, black, curly hair. Little Harpe, or Wiley Harpe, was a smaller built individual with pale skin and red hair. I think it said his hair was also curly, but it was red. And Wiley, who was the gentleman who Sally Rice did eventually marry. The Harpers were I think the word is Tories. They were British supporters during the American Revolution. And it's said that the Hart brothers, during all the lawlessness and fighting before or during the time of the Revolution, they witnessed American patriots murder their family when they were young. They were around teenage years. One article also stated that Micajah witnessed these patriots rape his mother before they killed her. I'm not making any excuses for the Harps by any means, but just a little back history. So, all of this occurred in Orange County, North Carolina. This was where the Harps, or Harpers, which their name was originally Harper, and they dropped the R. But after the death of their families, they joined up with a group of renegades who were going around killing and burning down homes of patriots. And this went on. They went on a path, and they somehow ended up in East Tennessee. They fought in the Battle of Kings Mountain along with Native Americans. And by going by their relationship with the Cherokee Nation and the description of Micajah, I think that he may be of Native American descent. His mother may have been a Native American. Some descriptions of him, it says he had red undertone in his skin. One of the articles I read said he was black. Another referred to him as Melungeon, which is a triracial or a mixture of, I can't say that word. Anyway, I could be wrong, but I am thinking that Micajah was part Native American. But the Hart brothers eventually settled in a place called Nickajack, which was around Chattanooga, with Native Americans. And there was some battles and fights that took place, and they eventually moved out of this area before the fighting became too bad, and they settled in a place in East Tennessee that was one place says that they settled in Powell's Valley, which was in Campbell County. But actually, with all the numerous publications that refer to their home as Beavers Creek, I think they were actually in what is Powell, Tennessee, which is a part of Knox County. And also it states that they lived about 4 miles from the Rice family, so that would put them in the Powell area. So they were living here, and they settled down, and somehow or another, Wiley Harpe charmed Sally Rice into marrying him. Her own father performed the ceremony. This was in 1797. I found one, after it was all said and done, there was a quote that said, in 1798, the Harpe women stated it was the turning point and when their men declared war on all mankind. Now, at this point in 1797, Wiley married Sally, and there were 2 women that were also with him. These 2 women were originally kidnapped. It said one of them was very young when they took them. And the brothers or cousins, they shared these 2 women as if they were their wives. They shared them. But after Wiley got married, he took Sally as his wife. One of the women became Micajah's wife, and the other was his supplemental wife. They were not legally married, but they you get my point. But in this year, 1797, they had a farm in the Knoxville area. And people started noticing that the Harpes was bringing a large amount of pork to sales that they didn't have the means to produce on their farm. And then they also got to noticing that pigs on various other farms in the area were disappearing. The Harpe brothers were stealing. They were stealing from their neighbors. And the Harpe brothers also, they had a very close friend at the time. His name was Doss, D-O-S-S. That was his last name. And it's written that their friend noted to them that he didn't like the way that they were treating the women. They were being very cruel to these women. Well, the Harpe brothers did not like this comment, so they killed Doss. Their signature later, after the whole spree is done, their signature, when they killed somebody, they would disembowel them. They would empty their stomach cavity, and they would fill their body with rocks and normally throw them in a river or body of water of some sort. And that's what they did to Mr. Doss. And I believe that was their first documented killing. All of the stuff that happened prior to the war or during the war, none of that is documented. This is a time where documentation is non-existent, pretty much. But when it was noted that they were stealing from all of the surrounding farmers, a posse formed to go after them. Well, they packed up their 3 women and they took off on a trail. And they went, their path of travel more than likely was through Anderson and Campbell and Claiborne counties and into Cumberland Gap, and then they hit the Wilderness Trail. The Wilderness Trail, I'm sure most of you are familiar with that from around the Appalachia area. But during this path of travel, they killed several on their way. Like I said, Doss, I have notes here. I've not scripted anything, but I have tons of notes. All the different victims and things like that. But the next victim was also in Knoxville before they left the area, and he was a man by the name of Johnson. They killed, disemboweled him, filled him with rocks, and threw him in the Holston River. Moses Doss Johnson, they went to like I said, they went through the Wilderness Trail. They killed a man by the name of Peyton. He was a peddler on the Wilderness Trail, bringing goods through the Wilderness Trail, selling goods in order to make a living. They killed him and took all of his belongings, including his horse and buggy and all of that. Then they came upon 2 travelers from Maryland. They killed them. Same trademark. They disemboweled them, filled them full of rocks. And then somewhere around Cumberland Gap, there was a man named Stephen Langford. He was a man that was, he was traveling from Virginia to Kentucky for some reason. And he was more of a well-to-do gentleman. He was traveling for business. And he met them it was at some sort of, I think, bed and breakfast. And he felt sorry for them, Because you had these two men who were very worn looking, rough looking, and they had three women who were all pregnant at the time, and they looked hungry. So Mr. Langford, being a kind-hearted person, offered to buy them all a meal. And they sat down and ate a meal together. He fed both the Harpe brothers and all three of their wives. And when he went to pay for their meal, Micajah, Big Harpe, he noticed that this gentleman had a pocket full of silver. So he schemed, and he convinced Mr. Langford that it was not safe to travel the wilderness road alone, that he needed to travel with them for his own safety. Mr. Langford agreed, and of course, Big Harpe and Little Harpe murdered him, disemboweled him, and took his silver. This one particular murder, where he was more well-to-do, it caught more attention. They even exhumed Mr. Langford's body after burial to examine and try to pinpoint what happened. But at this point, there was multiple different search parties after Big Harpe and Little Harpe. They traveled to a place called Hole in Rock in Illinois, and they met this gang of pirates. Now, what they did for a living was they lived in this cave that was right directly on the river, and people was traveling this river with rafts with all of their goods and belongings to take them downriver to sell. And this gang of pirates would rob these people of their belongings, and that's how they made a living. And the Harpe brothers fit right in for a very short period of time with these folks. But eventually, after witnessing some horrible murders committed by Big Harpe, this gang decided, you guys are too much for us. This is too evil. You're banned from our gang. Go away. So they sent them away. So this was when they decided that they was going to head back towards East Tennessee. But somewhere along the way, they stopped at a cabin of a guy named Mr. Stiegel. And Mr. Stiegel was away on business or some sort. Miss Stiegel and her infant child was at this cabin, and along with a surveyor by the name of Love. And he was going to stay the night at this cabin. He was doing his survey work. In Miss Stiegel's cabin, she had a cabin set up to where you go outside the cabin and around the back of the house, and there were stairs that went up to his sleeping quarters. And that's where Mr. Love was staying. And Miss Stiegel agreed to let the Harpe stay up in this loft. I don't know how this story came to be. If the things that happened the way they did, there was nobody left alive to tell it. But the story goes that Mr. Love started snoring in the middle of the night. And it annoyed Big Harpe. He didn't like the snoring, so he split his head open with an axe. So Miss Stiegel, unaware of this, the next morning was inside the kitchen preparing breakfast, and she had her infant in a rocker in the living space where the fireplace and all that was in this cabin. And the Harpe brothers entered, and she told them to have a seat. She was cooking the breakfast. She apologized for her baby being fussy this morning. It was colicky. And apparently at some point, Big Harpe told her, "Don't worry, I will quiet your baby." And while she was cooking, she noticed that the baby had got quiet, and she assumed that he was rocking her baby for her. But to her horror, when she came in with the food, she discovered that they had slit her infant baby's throat, and it was dead. She lets out shrill screams, which annoyed Big Harpe, so he decided he would have to kill her too, and he did. He killed her, and then they set fire to the cabin. At this point, a mob was sent after them, and they caught up to them, At one point, they decided to split up. There was a little bit of a disagreement because Big Harpe wanted a specific horse because he thought it was faster. He eventually got that horse, and he took off one direction. Little Harpe took off a different direction, and they left the women who were pregnant to fend for themselves. The two women that were with Big Harpe, they abandoned Sally. They took off somewhere else, and Sally was left on her own and pregnant. The mob eventually caught up with Big Harpe, and they shot him. It struck his leg. They waited until he got wore down. They drug him off his horse. There are various different writings. I'll share some newspaper articles along with this story. There are various different writings that say that before he was dead, Mr. Stiegel, Miss Stiegel's husband, with Micajah, however you say it, with his own knife, cut his head off while he was still alive before he died. And that his last words were, "Damn you, cut on," or something of that nature. But it also said in almost all of the publications about this incident that Big Harpe confessed to anywhere between 28 and 38 murders. The numbers are vary. But during this confession, he also stated that there was only one murder that he regretted. And that was when he killed his own infant daughter because she was crying by bashing her head into a tree. That was the only murder that he regretted. But regardless of how it happened, they cut his head off and put it on display on a stake at the fork of the road. This road, to this day in Kentucky, is called Harpe's Head Road. Little Harpe got away. They found the three women. At one point, somewhere in between all this, I think they were all put in jail, but they escaped. And then all of this happened. I think I skipped the part where they got put in jail, but you get the point. They killed a lot of dang people, a lot of people in a short period of time. This is 1799. Between 1797, when they were in Knoxville, and 1799 was when Big Harpe was finally put to death. It said that Little Harpe went back to Hole and Rock in Illinois with a gang. They found Sally by herself in a cave, and she was eventually brought back to Knoxville to her dad, and she gave birth. And I read one description. She eventually remarried and had several kids, but that baby that she gave birth to, it said that she was a beautiful little red-headed girl who had the temper of her father. But the other two women, they settled. I want to say they settled in Illinois, but Little Harpe, he joined back up with this gang until he read that there was a reward on the head of the leader of this gang. So he decided he was going to kill him and collect the reward. So he killed him, cut his head off, and took it in to claim the reward. At which point he was recognized. He was at this point going by the alias of John Sutton. But they recognized him. They knew he was Wally Harpe or Little Harpe. And he was arrested. He was tried. He was found guilty. He was hung. And his head was also removed and displayed on a stake. I want to say this was in Illinois. Maybe somewhere in Kentucky also. There was a lot of bloodshed. At one point, they killed a man named Brazel in Morgan County, Tennessee. While they were running from mobs, they come across two Brazel brothers on a trail. They were afraid that they would be recognized, so Big Harpe told the Brazel brothers that of the murders that the Harpes had committed, and then accused them of being the Harps. One of the brothers got away, the other one they tied up and shot. They killed several. I mean, the killing is unbelievable at all the people that they killed, and this was in the 1790s, and this is the very first documented serial killers in the history of America, and they were right here in the Appalachian Mountains. Most of our families, if you have a long history of being in this region, more than likely your ancestors are tied to either one of their victims, one of their wives, or them. It's a really crazy story. And there are, like I said, there are a lot of documentaries about the brothers, but there's not a lot that's said about the wives. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Sally and her history and the Rice family. You know, her dad was a preacher. I don't know how they convinced her or how she fell in love with Wiley, but I don't know. And I don't know if it was a point of all of these women were being held captive for all these years, because at one point they even escaped jail, and then the women were set free, and they went back and found them. It said that there was at least 2 children that these women had that the Harps just murdered. I don't know. Did they think that they couldn't live without them? I mean, life back then was hard. I don't know. I don't know what was going through these women's minds, why they stayed with them, how many of these murders they witnessed, but they were with them for the majority of them. Sally moved in with her dad in Knox County. She came back after Wally ran off to Illinois. She eventually married a man named Thompson. After a while, her and her father both moved to Alabama. I'm not sure why. And she remarried again. She had several children. But there was that one little redheaded girl who belonged to Wally Harpe. There are descendants of the Harpes. It's said that many of them changed their name so that they wouldn't be associated with these monsters. There's also people who say that Wyatt Earp was a part of that family and he changed his name to Earp instead of Harpe. I don't know. I've not researched that. But it's a crazy story. And it happened right here in Appalachia. And it's crazy. The American Revolution and the way that people acted, and it's a miracle that any of us are here. People were so savage, they just to survive, this is what they done. They killed, they fought when there was a war. It was war. It was all out. It was personal. They attacked your home. They stole all of your food. You starved. They burnt your homes down. They killed your children before your very eyes. And this was the environment that these Harps grew up in, and they just carried on after the war was over with this brutal murders. And the women, I mean, one of the wives is said to be the daughter of Captain Woods. Captain Woods shot and injured Wiley during one of the battles. So it said that to get even with him, they snuck into his home and stole her. I think there was a couple of women. It seems as though there was a Woods, and I can't remember the other last name, but then later on there was a Roberts woman that I want to say that's the one that Micaiah actually married. And at one point they all went by the alias of Roberts. There's so many things, and you can look it up, and there's a book that was written by Brazil. It's called, let me find it. Let me find that in my notes. Life as It Is, written in 1842 by J.W.M. Brazil. And it's got a lot of details about the Brassels or Brazils that were murdered in Morgan County. There was an 11-year-old girl. It said that they cut into strips. One of the articles said they cut her foot off and kept her toes as souvenirs. There was a John Slover. There was a man by the name of Trowbridge who was disemboweled and filled with rocks. Let's see. There was a man named Ballard. More about the Rice family. John Rice was the preacher who was Sally's dad. He was born in North Carolina in 1760. His wife was Edie Brown. She was born in 1764. James Rice, it was his brother who built the grist mill that you can see on display at Norris Dam State Park. He was born in 1753 and he married Rebecca Miller. He moved to Lost Creek in Union County. It's said that the preacher, John Rice, when he passed away in DeKalb County, Alabama, and he is buried in Town Creek Cemetery in Rainsville. 1794 is when the brothers moved from Nickajack to Knox County. In 1797, Wiley married Sally Rice. In 1798, Edward Thiel discovered missing horses, formed a mob, and discovered the Harpes had taken them. The Harpes had left their farm where they were captured 5 miles through the Cumberland Mountains. They escaped, but the horses were recovered. They stopped at Hugh's Rowdy Groggery a few miles from Knoxville and settled down to drink with a man named Johnson. The following week, Johnson's body was found floating in the Holston River, disemboweled and filled with rocks. That is the first reported victim of the Harpes. They murdered a man named John Tully. They murdered a man named Bradbury in 8 miles north of Kingston. 8 miles east of Kingston. They murdered a man named Hardin, a little boy by the name of Coffee, William Ballard, who was found in the Holston River, James Brazil, who we talked about on Brazil's Knob, John Tully, in Kentucky, a man named John Graves and his teenage son, a man named Trowbridge on Highland Creek, apparently they had a hideout somewhere between Oliver Springs and Wartburg, and that's the area where the Brazil man was murdered. And somewhere it says that they killed 2 men named Hudgens and Gilmore. But anyway, that's the information that I have on the first serial killers of America and all the families that were affected by these men's lives. So that's the story I have for you today. As always, if you like the content of my channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. I also do TikToks where I'm cleaning up headstones, but like I said, it's getting cold, so I'm not going to be doing many of them until the spring of the year. But follow me on my TikTok, my Facebook, and my YouTube. They're all titled Cleaning Up History with Maine to Be or Maine to Be Cleaning Up History. That's all I've got for you today. I appreciate all the likes, comments, views, and shares. And I hope that you learned something from this story today, because I learned a lot researching it. That's all I've got for you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.